it be but me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to my continued coverage of the 2022 NFL offseason. We're now talking about the 2022 NFL Scouting Combine. And if you recall, we took a one-year hiatus from this event. There was no combine last year. And I can't say that I missed it, but the whole pro day thing last year was kind of convoluted, to say the least. A lot of competing information. I like the combine format because it gives me a working baseline from which to go off of. When you hear a guy that didn't run at the combine just pop up out of nowhere and run a 4.37, there's nothing really to compare it to. Like, for instance, Jahan Dotson is going to run another 40 at Penn State pro day because he wasn't happy with his 4.43, which is plenty fast, but he thinks he can run faster, and he probably will run faster at his Penn State pro day. Whatever the case may be, whether it's a 4.37, it's a 4.39, which is the 4.43 that he ran at the combine, I know he's plenty fast. When you just hear a guy run a 4.37 at his pro day, and then you get somebody else saying, hey, I hand timed him at a 4.45, now you've got 0.08 of a second difference. That's a lot of a gap. You know what I'm saying? Still fast as hell. 4.37, 4.45. Who's keeping count, right? Still fast as hell, but we get caught up in the numbers a lot of times. So anyway, I digress. Day one of the combine. Speaking of plenty fast, day one of the combine was spectacular in all of its splendor. And I told you I don't get really worked up about the combine anymore. This used to be one of my favorite off-season events. It is no longer the case. However, I told you I am looking for specific things, and one of those things is speed. You can't quantify. You can quantify speed, actually. You can't begin to imagine how much of a difference running a 4.55 makes versus running a 4.42. It changes everything. I'll give you a great example. Penn State wide receiver, Ohio State wide receiver Chris Olave was a guy that I think a lot of us wanted to see just how fast he was. I didn't know if he was going to run, super fast. I looked at him as a Justin Jefferson type of guy. Justin Jefferson was, to me, the best example of a guy that he checked all the boxes. You just needed to know how fast he was. You needed to be able to assign a time to what you were watching on tape, because there were instances. The Texas game sticks out. Very first game of that 2019 season, he catches that pass down the sidelines and scores the touchdown to put the game away. But there weren't a lot of instances of him doing that, running away from people. So there was a question as to how fast he really was. He comes out, he blazes that 4.39 or 4.43 or whatever the hell it was. Case closed. He's fast as hell, and we go on to see Justin Jefferson tear the NFL to shreds. I think Chris Olave was another one of those guys we wanted to see that from. And if he goes out and runs a 4.52, we're like, oh, Chris Olave, he's cool, but he's not a first-round pick. Not at 4.52, he's not. He goes out and blazes the combine running that 4.39 that he ran, and unofficially it was a 4.26, which is why he decided to stand on that time. I wonder, would he have run again had he known it was a 4.39? I wonder if he would have went out and ran again had he known he didn't, come within, 0.04 of a second of, tying the all-time record at the combine. Same thing for the Baylor wide receiver. I can't think of his name, but he ran a 4.21 initially and later came back. He was the only guy to run a sub 4.3 at 4.29, I believe. But I wonder, would he have run again had he thought that he didn't just set the combine record? Whatever the case may be. Olave was a guy that we wanted to see how fast he really was. He checked that box off. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. Let's start there with the receivers, because to me, they're the main attraction. Even though we'll talk more about the quarterbacks, because that's what we do, because they're the most important position in all the sports. Receivers, to me, they carry the combine. Them and the corners. Everybody else in between, get in where you fit in. Offensive linemen will get excited about a guy that's 325 pounds that runs a 4.78, and that'll be all great, and that's fine and dandy. But we care more about the receivers and the cornerbacks. Those are the two positions where you look at and you say, wow, okay, how fast are you? How fast are you? So the receivers, I thought, were phenomenal. And I didn't know exactly what to expect from this group. I knew it was a deep class of receivers. I didn't know if there were any upper echelon guys that you needed to spend a top 15 pick on, sort of like the draft a couple of years ago with CeeDee Lamb and Henry Ruggs and, all of those guys that went and nobody went in the top 10. But then Ruggs, I think, popped the seal at 12 or 13. And then you had another Bama receiver go in Jerry Jeudy. Then you had CeeDee Lamb go. And so I thought it was kind of one of those drafts. And it still may be one of those drafts where you don't have a top 10 wide receiver. But then thereafter, you start to see those guys come off in droves in the first round. I think with some of the performances that we saw on Friday or Thursday evening, I think you might have seen a guy or two catapult himself into the top 10. If not in the top 10, you've got a couple of guys that were fringe first round picks that are comfortably in the first round, like Chris Olave, for instance. I thought he was a fringe first rounder. He's definitely in the first round now. I don't think he gets past, the top 20 now, with what he just turned in at the combine. So I think a lot of guys helped themselves. Let's get into this. This was the fastest group of receivers these eyes have ever seen. And statistically, if we're going by the numbers, it's the fastest group of receivers in NFL combine history since they started keeping the metric back in 1999. So I believe that's when they first started keeping the times of these players. So, I mean, this is utterly ridiculous what they were able to do. I remember there were years where we were begging guys to run sub 4.5s. This year, I mean, everybody and their mama was running sub 4.4s and sub 4.5s. 18 receivers ran a sub 4.5 at the combine between the two groups of receivers on Thursday evening. It is ridiculous. It's an asinine number. Of the 18 sub 4.5s, 8, count them, 8 were sub 4.4 40 times. Okay, now always remember this, because I told you one of the things I get excited about at the combine is speed. Keep this in mind. Speed doesn't equate to good. Okay, it just means you're really fast. Okay, and it's a great trait to have, but it doesn't mean that you're a good football player. So just keep that in mind. You can be plenty fast and still be garbage. However, speed is something you cannot teach. You can't go out in the backyard and get faster. You can't, after you're drafted, shave off a couple hundredths of a second. You're either fast or you're not fast. And these guys are fast. Now, what I want to do is I want to talk about some of these receivers in groups. So we've got the big body receivers, and those are the guys that I really get excited about. The small guys, I expect them to run fast. When they don't run fast, I'm disappointed. But the big guys, when they run fast, that's a game changer. When you get a guy with the combination of size and speed, you end up with a Mike Evans. Those are the types of guys that changes ball games. You come away with the DK Metcalf. Those are the types of guys that change ball games. Okay. Those don't grow on trees. When you get a Julio Jones, when you get a DK Metcalf, when you get a Mike Evans, those guys are hard to stop because they come with the rare combination and blend of size, speed, and athleticism and catch radius. And these guys that I'm about to talk about all bring that to the table. And so we start with Treylon Burks. That was a guy that we came into this process knowing that he was one of the premier performers and one of the guys would hear his name first among the wide receivers in this draft class. He did not disappoint. Checked in at 6'2", 225. I thought he was a little taller than that. I thought he was like 6'3", 6'4", but 6'2", 225, ran a 4.55, checked off all the boxes, made it look easy out there catching the football. He looks legit, and he's going to hear his name called very early on day one of the 2022 NFL draft. But that's a name that we knew going in. That's a name that reverberated around draft circles. Let's talk about some guys that were off the beaten path a bit that I think really helped themselves with their performance at the combine. So a guy that I felt like coming into this process, and I've got my notes here, right here, so I'll be reading from my notes that I took. A guy that I think was off the beaten path that people weren't talking about, almost like a forgotten man, was Georgia receiver George Pickens. This was a guy highly rated coming out of high school, looked apart as a freshman, had the injury, and only played in 4 games this past year. But when you look at him, a lot of people love to talk about the A.J. Green comparison. It's A.J. Green, and a lot of similarities there, the same size in terms of height. They both go to Georgia. I think George Pickens may have the best body control of any receiver in this draft. That's something that was a staple of A.J. Green, and really still to this day, something that he does ultra well. So I think George Pickens is another guy that is intriguing in this draft at 6'3", 195, ran a 4.47. So you get that blend that you're looking for of size, speed, athleticism. He had a couple of great catches that remind you of why you were excited about this kid when he first burst on the scene at Georgia. So George Pickens is another guy, if he's totally healthy, and it looks by all accounts that he is, that's a guy that is an intriguing name as you start to get into the second round of this draft, because you're going to see a lot of these receivers, come off the board in the first round and into the second round. I think that's another guy that is going to hear his name potentially second into the third round. He's definitely a day 2 guy for sure. Another guy that I wasn't really expecting a ton from, and people had asked me about him and I just dismissed them, similar to his quarterback, was Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati. Here's a guy, 6'3", 211. I was like, hey, Alec Pierce, look out for him. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. Runs a 4.4, 140 with a 40.5-inch vert. So those are eye-popping numbers for Alec Pierce. Makes big plays. You turn on the tape, he's a big play receiver for Desmond Ridder and that Bearcat offense. And he's a guy that gives you size, gives you speed, gives you athleticism with that 48.5-inch vert. He can go up and get it. I thought on the day, however, he looked mechanical. He looked like a guy that labored a bit. That's not to say that he can't. I just wasn't impressed with his movement skills. He's fast in a straight line. I didn't necessarily love everything else, but all things aside, when you're that big, you're that fast, and you've got the production that he had at Cincinnati, it's going to attract some attention. And he did himself some favors by going out and running the way that he did on Thursday in day 1 of the combine. Isaiah Weston is a guy that I had really no clue about out of Northern Iowa. Here's a guy that's 6'3.5", 214 pounds, ran a 4.4, 240 with a 40-inch vertical. And I thought he actually looked good. He looked clean throughout the day in terms of his movement skills. I thought he caught the football well for the most part. I walked away saying, hey, that's one of those guys that I've got work to do. When I go through that position, add him to the list of guys that I need to be aware of, because I thought he put people on notice with his performance at the combine. He definitely helped himself with his performance as well. That 4.42, one of the better times for a guy his size in this year's draft class. But the guy that I thought stole the show for all the big receivers, and to me made himself the most money of this group that I term big wide receivers, Christian Watson out of North Dakota State. This is a guy that I've watched for years at North Dakota State because of Trey Lance. Okay. So when you watch other players, you run into specific players. I always call it indirect discovery. Okay. When you're watching another guy and you just run into another player because you're watching this guy and this guy keeps making plays and flashing, you can't help but notice him. And that was Christian Watson for me watching North Dakota State over the last few years. And so I wasn't surprised that he came to the combine and did what he did. But still at 6'4", 208 pounds, to run a 4.36 with a 38.5-inch vertical, and to catch the football the way that he did, to run, to do the things that he did. I thought he was the most impressive receiver with size on the afternoon in day 1 of the combine. I think of the big receivers, I thought he helped himself the most. Okay. So if he came into this process as a day 2 pick, more likely a third rounder, I think he catapulted himself into the second round with his size, his speed, and his ability to go get the football. I thought he just really showed out on Thursday. And if you ask me who climbed the most of the big receivers, the big body receivers, I tell you it's Christian Watson of North Dakota State. So that's the guy I came away the most impressed with. He was my biggest winner of the big bodied receivers in this draft class. As we go to the smaller, more average size receivers, these are some of the names that stood out to me. Obviously, you have the guys that we came in looking for, the Chris Olaves, the Garrett Wilsons, the Jahan Dotsons of the world. Those were the guys we expected to go out and perform, and they did. Olave, 6 feet, 187, ran a 4.39. Initially, it was clocked as a 4.26, but the 4.39 was probably more on par with what a lot of you expected. I did not. I didn't expect him to run that fast. I thought he was going to run. So, and I told you what I thought. His time for me was anywhere from a 4.46 to a 4.51. Thought he would run somewhere in that neighborhood. For him to blaze a 4.39 was just mind-boggling. And to me, it solidifies him as not only a first-round pick, but I think a early to mid-round first-round pick. So I think initially you could have gotten Chris Olave back into the first round, into the second round, because a lot of times you will get spillage with some of these positions. You get an extra quarterback or two, you get an extra offensive tackle or two, maybe 2 or 3 DBs we didn't see going in the first round like we did a couple of years ago, and you get 1 or 2 receivers that spill over into the second round. A couple of guys that had no business getting into the second round. I thought Olave could be one of those guys. Not anymore. Okay. He's officially on notice from anywhere from pick probably 11 at Washington to probably somewhere in that Philadelphia Eagles range of, I think they've got back-to-back picks at 15 and 16. Like, he could go off the board somewhere right up in there. I could see the Eagles saying, we're not letting this kid get, by us. We need another receiver, to go with Devontae Smith. We're going to add Chris Olave to the mix because we don't trust Jalen Reagor. So I don't know. We'll see. But I just think Olave helped himself greatly. Garrett Wilson, I wasn't blown away by Garrett Wilson. He 6 feet, 183, ran a 4.3, 840, checked all the boxes, looks the part. The film tells the story. I just wasn't blown away by him. But again, that doesn't matter. What you do at the combine, all you need to do is cross-reference everything and check boxes. He checked the box. He's fast as hell. He can catch the football. The tape speaks for itself. I don't think he did anything wrong. He just wasn't overly impressive to me. Jahan Dotson, same thing. He came in. We knew he was going to run fast. Ran a 4.43 at 5'11", 178. He wants to run faster. He wasn't happy with his time. That's fine. He'll be okay. Bottom line is, the guy can pick him up, put him down. The guy can track the football in the air. He's got some of the most natural hands. That's one thing I can say. Watching him in the gauntlet drill, it was nothing. Guy ate it for breakfast. His hands are legit. One of the, probably the best set of hands in the draft. We all remember the catch he had against Ohio State up at Happy Valley a couple of years ago with no fans in the stands in 2020, where he catches it with one hand and snatches it down. I remember watching that thing live and jumping out of my seat. So we know this guy can catch the football. And I think he's a lot better than KJ Hamler, another one of those Penn State receivers with a ton of speed, similar size. I think he's better than KJ Hamler because, remember, KJ Hamler had issues with drops. You don't have that issue with Jahan Dotson. So I didn't think he did anything extraordinary throughout the day. I thought he was really solid. But what he did was he checked boxes. And so he's another guy that we expect to hear his name very early in the draft. So now you get to some of the guys off the beaten path, as I like to say, some of the guys that are lesser known, commodities. One of the guys that I thought helped himself a ton was Wan'Dale Robinson out of Kentucky, runs a Moses Malone 4.44. At 5'8", 178, he's one of those jack of all trade type of guys. You just find a way to get the football in his hands. I think he'll be a guy that teams will covet after seeing what a Deebo Samuel can do for your football team. Not to say that Wan'Dale Robinson is that, because again, Deebo Samuel is a sturdy 205 pounds. He's a small receiver in terms of size, 5'11", 6 feet, but he's built like a running back. All right, that's not what Wan'Dale Robinson is, but still, he's a guy that can give you a little bit of everything. And I thought he helped himself as well. Listening to them talk, he may end up in Los Angeles with the Rams. Their offensive coordinator is now in LA. And I think he loves Wan'Dale Robinson. I think that he may end up following him to LA. We'll see what happens there. But a guy that I talked about at the Senior Bowl as someone that impressed me and I thought his stock was starting to elevate was Khalil Shakir. So I said, this is a guy in Khalil Shakir that looks like a quick-footed but not super fast wide receiver that you put in the slot that wins over and over and over again. What he proved at the combine is not only is he quick, but he's not quicker than fast. He's just fast. Okay. So Khalil Shakir, wide receiver out of Boise, 6 feet, 196, goes out and runs a 4.43. To add with that quickness, that subtleness that he has, getting in and out of breaks, breaking dudes off, to run that time was so impressive. He was one of the guys that I walked away super impressed with. And he's just continuing to build upon what he did at the Senior Bowl. This guy, to me, is just rocketing up draft boards. He's another guy that I think when this process started was a day 3 guy, more likely than not, probably 4th round. I think with the Senior Bowl, now you throw this combine on top of it. All of a sudden now, this is another day 2 pick here, if you ask me, in Khalil Shakir. So he was another guy that helped himself. Kyle Phillips was one of my primetime performers at the combine in day number 1. 5'11", 189-pound receiver out of UCLA. Ran a 4.58. Man, this guy is screaming. I mean, absolutely screaming Hunter Renfrow, giving me all kinds of Hunter Renfrow vibes. And when I watch him, they talk about his competitiveness. They talk about his quickness, his ability to catch the football. Chip Kelly loves this guy, swears by him. He looks the part. He looks like another one of these white slot receivers that's going to come in and eat your lunch every single day, every single week. You got no answers for him because he's just that quick. Not super fast, as we see here with the 4.58. He doesn't have to be. That's not what he's going to ultimately do. Hunter Renfrow, not a blazer, but he'll beat your ass in the slot, and that's what I see out of Kyle Phillips. I thought he helped himself on day 1 of the combine. But the guy that I thought helped himself the most, the stock that went up the highest after his performance in day 1 of the combine, to me, was Western Michigan wide receiver Sky Moore. This was a guy that I talked about earlier in the process. Is a guy that I liked, but I thought we could sneak him to the 3rd round. That's no longer the case. And this is what the combine does, is when you think you can sneak a guy through, in the case of Olave, you think you can sneak him into the 2nd, maybe late stages of the 1st, that's dead. You think you can sneak a Sky Moore into the 3rd, that's dead with what he was able to put forth at 5'10", 195, just like Khalil Shakir, who can win inside with quickness in the slot. This is a guy that also can torture you outside with a 4.4 140 that he ran. So getting up the seam, but also getting outside. This is a guy that to me showed the best route running ability, some of the best hands. I thought he was the most fluid receiver all day at the combine for the receiver position. I just thought he was the best guy on the field, and he was my top performer of day 1 at the receiver position overall. Sky Moore, to me, was the best receiver on the field. And what it did was it gave me Brandon Cooks vibes. Similar size. I remember Brandon Cooks tearing up the combine back in like 2014 and me walking away saying, well, damn, that guy was super impressive. He was the best receiver on the field, and Brandon Cooks turned out to be a stud in the NFL and has been when he's been healthy. I see a lot of that with Sky Moore, man. I walked away super impressed and said, damn, he's the best wide receiver I watched on the field. Again, it's the combine. Don't put too much stock into it, but when you continue to stockpile, big time performances on top of each other and people walk away with a lasting impression every time they see you, they can't help but move you up the draft board. I think that's what Sky Moore is continuing to do throughout this process. So That's the receiver position. A lot of speed. As I mentioned, 18 guys ran a sub 4.5. 8 guys ran a sub 4.4. This was a ridiculous class in terms of speed. We'll see if that speed translates to good production for these receivers. A lot of times it does not. We'll see if this class can be different. Don't forget, there were a couple of guys that, we expect to be, and just keep in mind, 18 guys were sub 4.5. That was without the 2 Alabama wide receivers. Okay. That was without Jameson Williams and company. Okay. So, and John Mechie. Okay. Drake London probably wasn't going to run a sub 4.5, but I would have loved to have seen if he could have been right in that same neighborhood with Treylon Burks. I think he would have been. Might have even cracked a sub 4.5. Who knows? So this is a loaded receiver class. And we didn't even talk about 3 of the guys that are among the top receivers in this draft class, but weren't able to participate due to injuries. So this class is loaded, man. A lot of stuff here to digest at the receiver position. We move on to the tight end position. So if the wide receiver group is the fastest that we've ever seen and one of the deepest we've ever seen, this tight end class is, to me, it's deep and skilled, but it's not top heavy. Okay. So what does that mean? I told you this already with the tight end position multiple times, because we've talked about free agent tight ends and the impact that this draft class is having on the tight end position, because you're going to see a lot of guys that in past years with lesser tight end class would have been re-signed or would have been signed quickly to big deals because the tight end crop coming out of the collegiate ranks wasn't as deep and good. That's not the case this year. And because of it, the tight ends that are now free agents, I think, are going to suffer. They're not going to see as many dollars coming their way because teams are thinking about getting cheaper, younger labor in the draft. And this class did not disappoint in day one of the combine. So this is a draft class where you're going to start to see the tight ends. You won't have a first-round pick tight end. I don't think you'll have a first-round pick tight end. But what you will start to see is the tight ends come off the board in the second. And then I think you get a heavy concentration from rounds 3 through 5 at this. And again, when you think about the tight end position, just remember a lot of the best tight ends in the league weren't first-round picks. Travis Kelce was not a first-round pick. George Kittle was not a first-round pick. Okay. Mark Andrews was not a first-round pick. Darren Waller was not a first-round pick. Like in most instances, those guys weren't even second-round picks. Okay. So just keep in mind that a lot of the better tight ends aren't necessarily first-round picks, and they're usually coming from rounds 3 through 5. So this class is deep, and you're going to see a lot of talented starting caliber tight ends come off the board in rounds 3 through 5. Let's talk about a lot of them that were on display in day number 1. So Chig Okonkwo was the fastest tight end, 6'2" tight end from Maryland, ran a 4.52, wasn't impressed with him. Okay. I didn't walk away saying, oh my God, this guy lit it up like some people were doing. I didn't get those vibes from him. He ran fast, and that's great, but he's still not a guy that I would take over some of these guys that ran 4.8 and 4.7, this and that. So just because he ran fast doesn't mean he catapults, these guys that have a body of work that I think translates well to the NFL level. But that was, worth mentioning that he did have the fastest time of any tight end at the combine this year. But let's get to some household names, some guys that didn't run, but we expect them to hear their name, relatively sooner rather than later in the draft. So you start with Trey McBride, 6'4", 246-pound tight end out of Colorado State. No 40 for him. So he's going to wait until his pro day to do that, which means he's probably not that confident. And that's my knock on Trey McBride, is there's not enough separation for me on tape. There wasn't any separation at the Senior Bowl. Talked about that. And you don't see any separation a lot of times on tape. But what you do see is grown man hands and the ability to position his body in between defender and football, and a guy that can make contested catches over and over and over again. I also see a guy that will pick up some OPIs at the next level for pushing off and things of that nature. But Jason Witten, again, he couldn't outrun a slug, but he knew how to get open. And I see a lot of similar traits here with Trey McBride. And I thought he showed exactly what we thought, a guy with really good mitts at the combine. Jaden Wademeyer out of Texas A&M, I thought he would run. He did not run, which sends off bells, and he's one of those long laboring tight ends. He's not one of these quicker than fast guys. He's one of those guys that has build-up speed. I thought he would run. He did not run, so that tells me he doesn't have confidence in his speed. So we'll see what he ultimately does at his pro day, but I was shocked to not see him run. I think he's starting to cool off because there are drops on tape with him, and he's a guy that I think as you continue to watch him, you find holes and flaws in his game. You either love Jaden Wademeyer or you're like, he's okay. I think I'm in the he's okay, but I can find 3 or 4 guys that I like better than him. Not to say that he's not a good tight end and won't be at the next level, but I'm not sold on him quite yet. I thought his day was uneven. There were some drops. He kind of looked a little, like I said, he kind of looked like he was laboring a bit in his movement skills. There's something there talent-wise, but I'm still like, with him. We'll see. Another guy that didn't run the 40, this one was the most shocking, Isaiah Likely. I just knew he was going to run his 40, because I just expected him to be fast. When you watch him, he's a guy that can scoot on tape, so I just assumed he'd run a 40 out of Coastal Carolina, the Chanticleers. And no, he didn't. At 6'4", 245, he was a guy that started out this process. I remember DJ had him as his number 1 tight end going into the Senior Bowl. And I remember watching the UCLA tight end, Greg Dulcich, and saying, and you remember if you watch my my Senior Bowl analysis, I said Greg Dulcich was the best tight end that I saw at the Senior Bowl. And I guess Daniel Jeremiah agreed with me. He went back, watched the tape, came back and had Greg Dulcich as his number 1 tight end. And Isaiah Likely not running at the combine. Again, anytime a guy doesn't run that we expect to be fast and there's no injury, he just decides, I'm not going to run, that sends off bells and whistles for me. And it could be nothing. But a lot of times it is something. Because as Daniel Jeremiah said, if I'm fast, every opportunity that they give me to showcase my speed, I'm going to show it. Now, I get why Malik Willis doesn't want to run a 40. Totally get that, because you don't want people focusing in on your athleticism. You want people to look at you as a quarterback and a passer of the football. You can run. They know you can run, so you don't need to show them that you can run. But when you're a tight end, part of your job description is to run. And if you can run, you should display that when everybody's there to see it. He didn't do that. So that has me questioning what the hell's going on there. Anyway, I thought he was solid throughout the day. Thought he caught the football relatively well. And so we'll see what comes of Isaiah Likely when he gets to his pro day and things of that nature. A couple of other names to mention. Charlie Kolar out of Iowa State did not run a 40. Solid throughout the drills, though. Another guy that's going to be a solid tight end in the league. Cade Otton was a no-show in terms of performance. Did not do any of the on-field drills. Same can be said for Jeremy Ruckert, who is one of my favorite tight ends in this draft class out of The Ohio State University. So this thing is loaded. Those 2 guys didn't even perform. Similar to the wide receiver position, you had 3 of the top receivers not performing. We're buzzing about it. Same thing with these tight ends. So now you get to the guys that did perform on the field, that did do most of the drills, that did run the 40s. And you start with Jake Ferguson, a guy from Wisconsin that I think is going to be a really good tight end, can block in the run game, can get up the seam. He runs a 4.81 40 at 6'5", 250. So that 40 doesn't blow you away. But again, sometimes don't get enamored and caught up in the 40 time. Understand that some of these guys just know how to get open, and he's one of those guys. Also, he's a complete tight end. Will get after it in the run game as a blocker. So there's a lot to like. Speaking of guys that'll get after it in the run game as a blocker, Daniel Bellinger out of San Diego State, 6'5", 253, ran a 4.63. To me, San Diego State, they don't always produce tight ends that have a ton of NFL success, but they do produce NFL tight ends. It's a tight end factory, if you ask me. Kahale Waring and all of those guys that we've seen over the years come from San Diego State get an opportunity in the league. Now, again, what they do with those opportunities, it's up to them. But San Diego State, they play in a pro-style offense. They give these tight ends a chance to block, to show their ability to be able to do that, put that on film, and then they also throw them a bone every now and again. And so for me, Daniel Bellinger is another guy that I thought just looked really solid throughout the day. And with his blocking ability, he's going to have value to some NFL team. That is for sure. Another guy that was really interesting to me, Grant Calcaterra. So I always think of Grant Calcaterra from his days at Oklahoma when he was a big-time pass catcher, catching passes from the likes of Kyler Murray and such, and just making a ton of plays for the Oklahoma Sooners. But he also incurred a ton of concussions. It cut his career short. I thought he was done playing football. He reemerges at SMU, tears it up there as well. The guy is super talented, super athletic, 6'4", 241, and he showcased that athleticism running a 4.62. I was impressed with Grant Calcaterra. I think he's a really good football player. The question for me is, can he stay healthy? And is this concussion thing going to rear its ugly head once he gets to the NFL? He thought about hanging it up once before. What happens if he sustains another concussion or two? Will he, decide to hang it up once more? I don't know, but the talent is certainly there. And he's a guy that I thought helped himself in day number 1 of the combine. So now we get to a few guys that I thought really helped themselves. We start with Cole Turner. This is a guy, 6'6", 246, 33-inch arms, ran a 4.76 out of Nevada, played with Carson Strong for the Nevada program. And the thing that most impressed me about Cole Turner was this is a guy that was among the leaders in the nation in touchdown receptions. With that frame at 6'6" and with 33-inch arms, you can throw it up to him. And they had a new drill at the combine this year where, and I don't know if it was new or if I just was paying more attention to it this year, where they kind of run like a little fade route. They give a couple of stutters. They go out to the fade. Quarterback needs to put it up and give him a chance to get his feet down in bounds. And he looked so effortless and fluid in that situation. And when you put together the amount of touchdowns that he had, his size and the red zone target that he could be, and then you see his ability to go up, high point the football with that catch radius and that size, he could be a mismatch nightmare as you get into the red zone. I'm intrigued by Cole Turner, and he's a guy that I'm kind of eyeballing and saying, hey, he could really help a team if he's put into the right situation with a quarterback that can throw the fade ball. Jelani Woods, to me, was one of the biggest winners at the tight end position, if not the biggest winner at the tight end position. This is a 6'7", 260-pound, 34-inch arm tight end that ran a 4.61 40 with 24 reps of 2.25, which led all tight ends at the combine. Do you know how hard it is as a guy with longer arms for my size? Do you know how hard it is to pump out 24 reps? Because the longer your arms are, the further you have to push that bar up. It makes it so much harder than someone with short arms that can just pop them out. And for him to lead all tight ends with that size and length, and then to run one of the better times, he had the second fastest time of any tight end at the combine this year at 4.61. Wow. And not only that, I thought he moved well. I thought he caught the football exceptionally. I was shocked. And I said, okay, another guy to add to the list of these tight ends to make it an even deeper class of tight ends. So Jelani Woods was a guy that he's just scratching the surface as a tight end. He started out his career as a quarterback. So he's almost like Logan Thomas, maybe a little bit further along than Logan Thomas was coming into the league. Because remember, Logan Thomas came into the league as a quarterback and then made the transition about 2 years into his NFL career to tight end. He's a little bit further along in that process, but similar size, length, ability. He's just a guy that is a slab of clay right now. Man, if I'm a tight ends coach, what I wouldn't do to be able to get my hands on a guy like Jelani Woods, who I thought had a really solid day. Greg Dulcich, he was the number one guy for DJ coming into the day. He did not disappoint. I told you guys at the Senior Bowl that he was the most impressive tight end that I saw. And I thought he continued to build upon that. The buzz is building for him. And I think, with what he did at the Senior Bowl, what he did at the Combine, and, having people like DJ continue to beat the drum for him, I think he's going to ultimately be the first tight end taken in the 2022 NFL draft, and for good reason. 6'4", 243, ran a 4.69, caught everything in sight, essentially. This is a guy that, much like Jelani Woods, just scratching the surface. He came to UCLA as a wide receiver, and Chip Kelly told him, your future is at tight end. You put on weight and you put in the work, you'll be in the NFL. Chip Kelly did not lead him astray. Greg Dulcich is going to hear his name called relatively early in this draft, and I think he may ultimately be the very first tight end to hear his name called. And I thought he put pretty much a period on that with his, not an exclamation point, but I think he put a period on it with his performance at the Indy Combine. So that's the tight end position. Now we get to the quarterbacks. And for me, I told you the Combine doesn't do much for me at the quarterback position, because at the end of the day, they're throwing the guys that they're not accustomed to throwing. You're just going out there and you're letting it rip. And I think the one thing you can see at the Combine is arm strength, because the accuracy may not be there, because of the timing of things. You would like to see a guy come out and just rip it and be accurate and put the ball where it needs to be. That's what you're looking for. But, we can make a million excuses for these guys. So I don't really put too much stock into the quarterbacks. But there were a couple of off-the-field tidbits that garnered some attention from this group of quarterbacks. Let's get into that quickly. You start with Kenny Pickett, a guy that actually did perform on the field, did run a 40, and he's actually an impressive 4.73 40. Okay, that's a really good time for Kenny Pickett. Shows his athleticism. It matches what we saw on tape with him. So he checked off a box there. But what box he did not check, and he was running from this, I told you he was running for a reason. He did not have his hands measured at the Senior Bowl. I told you, anytime a guy refuses to do something that everyone else is doing and that shouldn't be a problem, you know what I mean? That means it's a problem. And when we start hearing excuses like, oh, I had to get my hand stretched and massaged because I got double jointed thumbs and all kinds of bullshit. When you start hearing excuses, that's telling me, okay, you're hiding something. What he was hiding was small ass Burger King hands, girly hands. I have them too, so I can't talk. I got small ass, Burger King, girly hands. All right, if you've seen the commercial with the little Whopper and the guy with the little small tiny hands, that's my hands. That's apparently Kenny Pickett's hands as well, 8.5. So it is what it is. And Kenny Pickett said, look, it is what it is. I mean, I can't, there's nothing I can do. Joe Burrow had 9-inch hands. Everybody wanted to castrate him for that. And he's like, okay, I'm going to retire from football because my hands are too small. It is what it is. He wears gloves for a reason. It gives him more grip of the football. So I think he'll be fine. I'm not going to, read too much into it, but his hands are small. And some people swear by that. Okay. If he would have played at USC, out in SoCal, I would have had an issue because I could say, hey, the one day that it was inclement weather at Senior Bowl, he struggled. But the man played at Pitt. It's cold as hell. You get some inclement weather at Pitt, and he was able to navigate his way through it. So I think he'll be fine. But that was something that was a big conversation leading up to the Combine. Now that riddle has been solved, and some people will have a problem with 8.5-inch hands. I can tell you this much. They showed a list of quarterbacks with 8.5-inch hands. It didn't look good. The last guy to have any real success with less than 9-inch hands was Michael Vick. So it's the list is not long, and it's not inviting if you're Kenny Pickett, but he can buck that trend. On the field, I thought he was solid. He didn't wow me. And I told you, he's got a Joe Burrow type of arm. So he wasn't going to be one of those guys that went out there and threw a 65-yard rocket down the field in the go ball route. Right? He wasn't going to showcase his arm talent. He was just looking to do his job, and he did that for the most part throughout the day. And I thought he showed some athleticism running the 40, and I thought he had a solid day. He didn't hurt himself. He didn't catapult himself, but he didn't hurt himself. If he was number one going in, he's still number one for you. Matt Corral was the other piece of non-on-the-field information that was pertinent. Matt Corral looks like he's about 6 feet tall. When you look at him, he looks diminutive. He doesn't look like a guy that is any taller than Baker Mayfield. And remember, we had a big discussion about Baker Mayfield's height. Matt Corral checked in at 6'2", 212. So not only was the weight bigger than what we thought, we were talking he would probably be hovering around 205, 200, 205, came in at 212. Now, again, I don't know what it looks like. He could be heavy. He could have put on the weight for just the combine and then, you know, immediately loses that weight and gets back down to 205. It's possible. But checked in at 212, and he checked in at 6'2", which is huge for him. Because one of my biggest knocks was on him that he wasn't a big dude. And there's nothing you can do about that. But if you're 6 feet, you're 6 feet. If he's 6'2", that changes things. A lot of 6'2" quarterbacks walking around the NFL. Tons of them. All right. You can survive and thrive in this league at 6'2". You can survive and thrive at any height, honestly. However, it's a lot easier. The taller you get, the easier it becomes. So 6'2" does him a ton of good. And that was huge, even though he wasn't able to participate on the field. Coming off of that ankle injury that he sustained in the bowl game, he's going to wait till his pro day. Reportedly, he's 100% healthy, just wants to give himself more time to showcase his skills at his pro day. So we'll see what happens with him down the road. But for the guys that did perform on the field, Desmond Ridder, fastest quarterback time of the combine, 4.52. Initially, it was a 4.49, but his official time was a 4.52. I didn't think he was going to run that damn fast. So that was one of those, much like his teammate Alec Pierce, who blazed it. I didn't expect Desmond Ridder to run as fast as he did. I actually thought he threw the football well. I thought he was one of the better throwers of the football at the combine. Again, doesn't change my stance on Desmond Ridder, doesn't change my perception of him. He is what he is as a quarterback to me. But I thought he looked good. I thought he did some really good things. I was impressed with what he put forth, during the combine on the field workouts. And he's one of those guys that apparently has a Dak Prescott type of personality, magnetic. I told you he's a mature guy. That's one of those buzzwords that you hear when associating Desmond Ridder with a personality trait. It's mature because he's got a kid. He's got a fiance. So, teams like that. They like guys that are settled down, that aren't wild out here in these streets, because that means their focus is going to be more so on football than out here trying to, chase these skios and, go after this money and doing all kinds of nonsense out here in these streets. He's going to be focused on going home to his family after a long day at work. So I think teams also are enamored with that kind of thing. But I thought Desmond Ridder had a good day overall. Malik Willis was a name that has continued to be polarizing throughout this process. I talked about his skill set, and I said he's toolsy. Reminds me a lot of Justin Herbert in the sense that he's toolsy, not size or anything like that, but just the fact that he's got the athleticism, he's got the arm talent, he's got everything that you're looking for except for his size. But that was on display. He was one of those guys that, we've seen this in the past with Justin Herbert and Josh Allen and these guys that have rocket arms. And just let the receivers run down the field and then decide to chuck it deep. I thought, Malik Willis showcased his arm. And that's the one thing you can do as a quarterback at the combine is you can showcase your arm talent. I thought he did that. It was a great performance by him in terms of letting it rip. And I thought he actually dropped some of those footballs in the bucket as well. So I thought the footwork actually, for a guy that didn't really play under center while at Liberty, I thought the footwork actually did not look half bad. So Malik Willis, I thought he did some really good things. And by all accounts, he continues to interview well and knock it out of the park there. We all saw, I talked about this already, we all saw the social media post about him giving a homeless guy, I think it was some memorabilia or something that he pulled out of his bag. So, I mean, he seems like a really good dude off the field. And I think he's continuing to impress people on it as well. Carson Strong was a guy that I think a lot of people were intrigued by. I still think he is a third-round quarterback. I've said that before, and I'll continue to say that. But he was another guy that showcased the arm talent. He let it rip. And I knew his arm was strong, and he has a really good deep ball, but I did not know his arm was that strong. So he definitely showed me something there with the arm talent. But Carson Strong is another guy you throw in the mix that has a chance to maybe open some eyes and make some things happen. But in this day and age of quarterbacks, when you're a pocket passer, I just think it's a lot tougher. You're going to have to go above and beyond the call of duty to prove to people that you can get it done. And then adding in his injury history doesn't help him any. But he's definitely got some talent, that's for sure, this Carson Strong. Sam Howell was a guy that a lot of people at the Senior Bowl wanted to see take a step forward, remind people of why he was a Heisman Trophy, preseason candidate and favorite. He didn't do it at the Senior Bowl. The same thing came up in the combine. Like, we want to see Sam Howell take that step and assert himself and remind people why he was so highly sought after his sophomore season at North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He did not do that in the day one of the combine. I just thought he was average. As a matter of fact, none of the big guns was in. He had the entire first half of the combine in terms of the quarterback groups. They split them into two with the two different receiver groups. He had a chance to really separate himself because he had the floor to himself. There wasn't another quarterback in his group because of the last names. All of the big guns, Pickett, Willis, Strong, Ritter, were all in the second group of quarterbacks. So if Matt Corral were out there, they would have been competing against each other, but Corral wasn't. So it was just Sam Howell. All he had to do was go out and stroke it, and everyone would have been talking about him because there was no other quarterbacks in his group to really speak of. And instead, he was overshadowed by the guy that I thought had the best day of any quarterback. And again, this doesn't mean a damn thing because this guy had the best day. And all that did, I think, was turn him from an undraftable quarterback to, hey, let's take a flyer on this guy in the 7th round of the draft, which is better than not getting drafted, right? I'm talking about Cole Kelly out of southeastern Louisiana. This guy is a big-ass son of a bitch. 6'7", 250, slinging that bitch. I mean, he had on a knee brace. He looked like somebody's uncle playing a pickup game of basketball, that always had game, but he's still out there giving it to these boys at the local Y. He looked like somebody's uncle out there slinging that bitch. And then can he sling it, okay? He was throwing that peel. I mean, he was slinging that son of a bitch, and he was dropping dimes on the go route, on the post corner. I'm talking about dime after dime, and he looked like he was in his bag. He was feeling it, and you could tell he was like, I belong here. Now, again, southeastern Louisiana. Apparently, this guy's an athlete. He did not run the 40. I would have loved to have seen what kind of time he put forth. But Steve Smith Sr. said, look, we had this guy at a camp in Carolina. The dude can run. He talked about him. I think he played in the East-West Shrine game, and he showed off athleticism there. I got to go back and check this shit out because I'm intrigued now. Again, I'm not talking about this guy, shooting up draft boards, and now he's a 3rd-round pick. He went from undrafted, okay, not going to be drafted, to potentially, 6th round at the earliest, 7th round more likely, where you say, hey, let's take a flyer on this guy, okay, and see, like, at worst, he's Nate Sudfeld, another big, tall son of a bitch that can throw the football around the field. I like what I saw. Of all the quarterbacks, Malik Willis, Desmond Ritter, all of these boys, Kenny Pickett, Cole Kelly was the most impressive to me. And he made Sam Howell look like a chump. So, EJ Perry was another guy, off the beaten path, went to Brown, 6'2", 211 pounds, ran a 4.65 40, looked athletic, threw it well throughout the course of the day. He was fine. another guy that may ultimately find himself getting drafted because of his performance at the combine. But Cole Kelly, for me, man, he was slinging that thing. I was like, whoa, okay. Cole Kelly, ladies and gentlemen. So he might have gotten himself drafted, because when you do what he did, when you throw it the way that he did, when you're as accurate as he was and you slinging it, and you outduel a guy that's supposed to be at worst a second round pick, and you make him look like a chump, some people walk away saying, hey, gotta check this dude out. So that was day one of the combine. We're now rolling up on the 4 o'clock hour. So you're about to run right slam into day number 2 of the combine. We will have another breakdown for day 2 of the combine that will feature, what's today? Let me make sure I got my days right. I would assume this is offensive lineman today. Let's see. We have the offensive lineman and special teams today. So like I said, they usually get all the offense out the way, and then they go to the defensive side. Tomorrow we'll have D linemen and linebackers, and then we'll finish up with DBs on Sunday. So this will be a very uneventful day, but it's one of those necessary evils. So running backs, offensive linemen, special teams. Oh, running backs. Forgot all about running backs. So there will be a reason to tune in for that recap. The running backs will be performing along with the offensive linemen. And I don't think we have a first-round running back in the mix, but that doesn't mean we don't have any good running backs. Similar to the tight end position, I think this ultimately will be a good crop of running backs, just not one that you get in the first round. Derrick Henry wasn't a first-round pick, and we saw what he did. And that was another one of those, quote-unquote, not deep, not talented running back draft classes. And, you get Derrick Henry out of that group. So we'll see. And it could be one of those guys in this year's draft class. We'll see if anybody's able to separate themselves with their performance at the combine. So that's going to do it for me, your man, Louie T. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys tomorrow for day 2 recap as we head into day number 3. So offensive linemen, running backs, and specialists today. We'll break that down tomorrow and get you ready for the defensive side of the football. The deepest part of this draft, without question, is the edge rushers. It's not even close. They are so talented. It's so deep. It's top heavy. But then it spreads throughout. I mean, you could find yourself getting a Danielle Hunter type in the 3rd round. It's that deep this year. It's ridiculous. So that will be something to keep an eye on as we get to day number 3. But let's see what these running backs do. I think that's one of those positions we're glossing over right now because nobody stands out. Let's see if anybody can make a name for themselves today. So it's going to do it for me, your man, Louie T. You know what it is. Get off the bench, get in the game, and kick it with me, your man, Louie T. Until next time, you guys have a good one. If you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button for more great content. Turn on your notification bell so you don't miss a thing. And to also hit the like button as it helps this channel grow exponentially. Until next time, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the festivities. If you're watching the combine, God bless your soul. If you're not, I'm watching it so you don't have to. See you guys next time. Have a good one.